All right, we're gonna get started here. As we get kicked off into our roll call, want to welcome all of our members from the public. Just for your information, this meeting's being conducted according to Robert's rules. The public is welcome to listen in and attend. If you wanted to make public comments, that's something that has to be signed up for ahead of time. So getting kicked off, we'll do roll call first. We'll do in-person people first. Richard Smith, present.
Jeffrey Zuba, present.
And then on Zoom,
Jessica Cannon, present.
Liz Goodson, present.
Sean Sullivan, present.
DJ Klein, present.
perfect. First order of business is approval of the November minutes. Do we have any comments, discussion before approving them? Not hearing any. November minutes are approved. We'll move on to item number one, which is introductions for our new committee members.
Yeah, I'll kick it off here. We're very happy that we have two new members. One of whom is here today, Matt Mazzarelli. You'll meet at our next meeting. He had a business trip scheduled for this one previously scheduled, so he was not able to make it today. But here with us today is Mr. Jeff Zuba, one of our newest members. So we'd just like to give him a minute to introduce himself with a little bit of background and just give him a chance to introduce to the whole group.
Well, thank you, David. Hello, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity to serve on the committee. I'm currently retired. I spent about 40 years in the electric power business in various capacities, about over 20 years with an electric utility in New Jersey, but then I also had a chance to work for manufacturers and end users of power equipment. Also worked for an energy services company, and have some experience with different types of power generation, not only the conventional stuff with oil and gas turbines, but also some alternative energy as well. So with that, I'm just hoping to find a way to contribute positively to the group. And again, I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you, and appreciate your willingness to serve on the committee. So with that, we'll jump right into.
Yeah, so we can move right into item number two. This is the Southern Sustainability Directors Network public comment letter for the current Duke carbon plan. Hi, Andrea. Note that Andrea Bennett is attending. Hopefully you guys have all had a chance to review this prior to our meeting. But David, if you want to just kind of give us the intro to, the intent behind this, and then we can kind of go through discussion of comments and questions.
Yeah, well, as y'all will remember from a few years ago, we kind of went through this with a previous Duke Energy carbon plan, and we've actually, kind of had the opportunity to provide some comment on a couple of them in the past. And as you'll remember, it's quite a process to not only get the entire comment letter together with input, from local governments from across the state, which is what y'all have here in front of you is kind of the initial draft that the SSDN kind of working group has put together as a starting point. There's going to be some additional meetings with SSDN and local governments from across the state moving forward, but this is kind of the first iteration of getting everyone's kind of, here's what we're concerned with, here's how it's going to impact our goals. Here are the areas we, like to focus the comments on in regard to Duke's current integrated resource plan, carbon plan. So, I think I think this is going to provide us a great opportunity to focus on some things that, I think are quite important to not only our clean energy goals, but some of the areas that, a lot of our city council recently ran on as important issues. Number one being, affordability. That's not just about affordability of homes, but, how you operate the home and paying for all of those utility costs as well as, and as we're aware, those utility rates over the next few years with, Duke's current demand projections and what they're going to be putting in front of the utility council, those electricity rates are going to be doing nothing but going up over the next several years. So, I think this is a great opportunity for this group to, get the message across that we're, paying attention to what's being put in front of the utility council and being able to weigh in on what's important to Wilmington. So, obviously this is the first draft and the outline, but we're going to be having some additional meetings coming up in the next few weeks, the SSDN group. So I think this is a good opportunity to get y'all's initial thoughts. And there's some areas perhaps that this initial outline letter did not touch on that you think are important to include, as, particular areas that Wilmington may want to focus on. Would love to hear your input, and I'll be sure to provide those comments at our next SSDN committee meeting. I didn't include it in here, but there's also an initial kind of talking point letter that's being drafted that, as we're beginning to present this to city leadership, kind of some common language that will perhaps make it easy for them to digest. As I think a lot of our comments from some of the previous work we've done in this area, that the comment letters got way much too in the weeds and too long, and could easily get a little bit too wordy for our leadership comfort level. So trying to find that correct balance and identifying all the areas of concern, as well as, being something that city leadership could get behind. So with that, I don't know, open the floor for discussion.
David, I have a couple of questions and probably comments at the same time.
Sure.
Is the Southeast Sustainability Directors Network a intervening party, or is this part of the docket that's public comments?
I'm not sure yet if they're going to be official interveners. I know some of the other local governments in the past have filed to be official interveners as opposed to just signing the public comment letter.
Okay. I think this document, the comment letter, touches on some really good and important parts. One thing that it really does touch on is really around number 3 about the resource mix. I do think that's probably true. However, it does start talking about the addition of additional solar and battery storage. And one of the pitfalls of some of these renewables, specifically solar and wind, is it's not a dispatchable generation load. And so you can't at any given time say, okay, I need to inject 10 megawatts, 30 megawatts, 100 megawatts onto the grid. And that's why some of the resource planning to make up for all these large loads that are being added to the state are relying upon gas turbines and delaying coal retirements, because that's dispatchable generation, and obviously new nuclear. It talks about in section 3, part B, subsection II, about delaying coal retirements has significant air quality, public health, and economic consequences. North Carolina has one of the cleanest clean smokestack acts that was enabled in 2020, or sorry, is 2002, and we've drastically reduced the amount of NOx and SOx. Can we do better? I'm sure, of course, but I think that needs to be recognized, and that's lacking in this. It's basically alluding to that North Carolina, has dirty coal, which, I know no one likes the word clean coal, but I think that the state has made strides on having some of the cleanest coal generation in the country. And so I'll be really cautious on how we push the Utilities Commission on resource mix. I know it's an important thing, but I think you need to have an all above strategy. I do think that's, at the end of the day, we're going to see some commitments to nuclear, and then, maybe it's delayed or it ends up having cost overruns, et cetera. But we have to have a strategy or we're going to run into a power generation problem.
Right, right. Yeah, and in particular for the Wilmington area, with GM, GE being here, it's an important employer as well. So the small nuclear, is an important resource for the area.
I mean, they're supplying natural gas turbines too, right? So,
True.
GE here is not just nuclear. I mean, I know they're in aerospace. I know we talked about they do wind, but it's, to your point. We need to be very careful on making sure that we don't say something that's out of bounds, or force something that ends up being detrimental.
Well, I think one of the points that, the SSDN letter here is emphasizing is the growing demand. The demand estimates, they would like to see a bit more research and actual data behind how those assumptions were made. Not sure what's going on there.
Stop. Yeah, close that.
I had no idea.
Yeah. Sorry, I
Yeah.
lost my train of thought there. Yeah,
The modeling, I think is where you're at, yeah.
yeah, more modeling and
Transparency.
around how they're coming up with their demand numbers, and what assurances are there if they go with these extraordinary demand numbers and build out all of this infrastructure, and that demand doesn't actually come to fruition. It's lower than what was anticipated. Is that gonna what will be in place to protect the ratepayers against that kind of situation?
Well, David,
Yeah.
on the modeling front, I think it's important to recognize that the model that Duke Energy uses, the software they use, is also available to public staff. It's a very expensive tool, so most companies or organizations can't afford to own it, but the state has funded it through the public staff, and Utilities Commission is not the ones that are producing these models or working with them. So I think maybe that's an opportunity for the sustainability network the Southeast network to work with public staff to be getting some of that visibility in the models.
Right.
Because the data is out there. You just can't disseminate the data because you don't have the tool.
Right.
PJ, you mentioned the lack of dispatchable energy with, solar and wind. Do you consider, do you feel like increased battery storage is a dispatchable form that could offset some of the other, or it's just not scalable at the moment to be practical?
So I think it's the pure definition that is available of what is considered dispatchable. And if you think about, and I'm going to use a very generic, probably not the greatest example, but at least will drive the point home, is when we had the Canadian wildfires and we had a lot of this several days of smoke blanketing the Northeast. Well, if your batteries are sized for 8 hours and you went several days without usable sunlight, then those batteries became useless for you after that 8 hour period. So I think I don't know what the time horizon on how much generation, how many hours of batteries will need to hold before it will be considered dispatchable. The definition may be 4 hours. I don't know. I haven't looked into it to see at what point does battery, solar plus storage becomes dispatchable.
It certainly wouldn't have the response time that a gas turbine would have in a peaking application.
From the discussion I've been hearing, it's like the batteries would help shave the load down.
Shave it
So
down.
you don't necessarily have to spin up an extra natural gas turbine.
Gotcha.
So just to supplement the grid in those periods of peak demand. So, but to be.
I think PJ really raises some good points with respect to the mix of assets. From an environmental standpoint, though, the thing that kind of jumps out at me is the accelerated retirement of the coal assets. And I can understand Duke's point of view where they say, well, we need those for base load purposes, especially when you see more demand coming from manufacturing and data centers and all that kind of stuff. But it also has a higher cost to run than the natural gas units. So, in terms of our response or comments to this letter, the thing you might want to consider just emphasizing is the cost to continue to run those coal assets versus, the natural gas combined cycle units.
So Jeff, two words of caution there, and I agree with you partially. So you have subcritical and critical units, right? So the operating cost of a subcritical versus a critical unit is obviously different. One of the concerns in North Carolina is when we had the objective to get 70% reduction by 2030 with complete net neutrality by 2050. If Duke Energy is building additional coal or additional natural gas units in the 2030s that had 50-year life expectancies, well, then you have stranded assets when you get there. And so what is the trade-off? Do you continue to run those coal critical units that have very low emissions, obviously higher than the natural gas, and not have a stranded asset? Or do you get stuck? What Duke was doing was accelerated depreciation. So some of these assets haven't hit their fully depreciated life, and they were accelerated depreciation to get them off the grid to lower the carbon impact.
I do see where they have plans on building more combined cycle units, and I think that's a great thing, but they must have been breathing a sigh of relief whenever they got the 70% requirement eliminated. Mostly because of the time it takes to construct those things. I mean, it takes you 2 years just to develop it and do the engineering, and then another year and a half a year and a half at best, probably 2 years to build one. So, 2030 would have been, I'm sure they would have been hard pressed to meet those, to meet that goal.
No, not at all. I'm a little bit torn on PJ's comments because, for the most part, I agree with him. From a practical standpoint, I feel from a mission standpoint, I don't know I don't know how our mandate in this room affects. Do you go with what's most practical or most fitting to our mandates? So, what, I guess I don't know, and I don't have an answer to that question. I guess I can just kind of share the notes that I had from reading this. I don't feel particularly strongly about any of this, but it's more kind of like observations or ideas that like thoughts that I had was I did notice that in the introduction, there's nothing about the advantages of protecting the environment here. You know, we talk about affordability. They talk about clean energy, like having a clean energy system. It doesn't really, there's no part about like, you know, protecting North Carolina's environment, you know, maintaining a whatever the marketing line is, you know, a beautiful North Carolina for us all to enjoy or something like that. So that is something that could be added there, especially because like, you know, like we said, our a third of our city council now that were all new and you know, currently relevant participants ran on an environmental platform. So it kind of indicates to me that there's some local support for something like that. For section number 2, talking about the economic, you know, implications. Again, like to PJ's point, you kind of want to play nice with Duke and the state legislature. You know, I feel there's an opportunity you could point something to, you know, given the passage of Senate Bill 266 and the approval of construction in progress rate increases, you know, that exposes ratepayers even more to the risks of this increased demand forecasts. And you could also include something that include a piece of evidence that shows some of the significant increases in costs seen around the rest of the country already due to these increased demand loads. You know, like whether it's the AI data centers or the increased manufacturing in different areas. I was a little curious what the open a proceeding part 2, section D, subsection 3, or I open a proceeding to investigate co-located large-scale behind-the-meter solutions for large load customers. I don't know much about that. I was curious if kind of what that recommendation entails.
I'm glad you asked that question because that's on one of my notes.
Yeah. So that's something maybe to get some feedback from the directors network and ask some questions on that. Section 3, you know, like the section 3, subsection B, part 1, they're talking about natural gas, highly volatile commodity. You could add a figure showing the volatility of natural gas prices. I think would be relevant, especially, you know, I think the best example is 2002 when the war in Ukraine kicks off and you see these prices skyrocket. And that, you know, that's not something that you can long-term forecast for. That's you know, this happened overnight.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
The other thing that you could add more highlights to is that, you know, right now a natural gas plant, a natural gas turbine is more expensive to deploy than a solar farm. Now, to PJ's point, you need some level of that dispatchable. You can't just say we're just going to put in solar, but you can highlight that this is, you know, it's not just that like this is easier or that that renewable, that solar is better. It's also cheaper in most cases. And if need be, there could be put in a chart there that just shows the deployment cost per megawatt hour of deploying each of these resources.
That's
Well,
a good idea.
I think you need it. I think you would need a chart showing disturbable land impacts as well, and then life cycle costs. You know, solar panel, large scale solar farm doesn't have the same life expectancy as of other assets. So I mean, I agree with you on that. It is the cheapest to deploy, but I think there's other factors that need to be included, right? Other tags or other sides of the story that we make sure we're telling a complete story.
Well, I don't think you're wrong, but I also like, I know I'm trying to be sensitive to David's point of not getting too in the weeds, and then I'm trying to think of there is Given my druthers, yes, this would be like more informational, unbiased, but there also is like some sort of an advocacy element here, right? So like maybe we don't have to completely tell both sides of the story. I don't know. And then for section D, the, again, PJ's kind of poking holes in the notes that I had, but the subsection D, part number 1, where they say resource and reliability needs are met with truly least cost solutions. I don't really like truly least cost, because that really comes across as kind of like least cost at the expense of everything else. And that just, to me, the wording makes it sound like it really should just be price above anything else. And there are other considerations on both sides, both to our point for the clean energy advocacy, and then to PJ's point to reliability and resiliency. So I would try and maybe just reword that. And then depending on the priorities of the directors network, I was thinking that there's an opportunity here to have something about supporting battery storage programs to increase resiliency. Like, so Duke had I can't remember the exact name of the program off the top of my head, but Duke was running a residential program where they were offering a significant rebate for residential battery storage.
Power pair.
They ended that program at the end of the calendar year. If they were to bring something like that back or continue to support those kind of programs, that encourages local resiliency. And
I think Duke is talking about that, not only bringing it back, but also making it open to commercial as well.
Because I think that's something I would include in here, because I think that fits kind of right into the points that this letter is trying to make about resiliency, about affordability, there's a section in here about DSM programs and energy efficiency programs. So I think I think it may be worthwhile to include that.
Yeah, that is a DSM program.
Yep.
And Rich, one of your comments made me think of that something else that I think we need to also look in the mirror and think about this. So if you go back in history, when we had the before the committee was created, and then we had one of our first committee meetings was like, all right, let's prioritize what we're going to go after. Energy efficiency was always on the top. And I vaguely remember being in a meeting where I said, hey, Duke Energy is going to do this for us, unless there is a change at the legislation or something happens where the date gets pushed out or something, and it's not going to help us meet our commitment. And we need to continue to push doing things ourselves to meet our own commitments. And so when I read this letter, one thing that kept going back in my head was like, well, what is the city of Wilmington doing to hit their own commitments beyond forcing Duke or the Utilities Commission to tell Duke, this is what path you need to go down? And I think if you look at the list that David has of things we've done since 2021, that list doesn't significantly move the needle when there are opportunities inside to be chartering our own path, but we have chosen to either not fund, or it's taking us a while to get there. And I know we're going to talk about the energy study at Skyway as well as the headquarters, but I think this is forcing some entity, being the Utilities Commission, to make a decision to help us get to where we want to be, versus us advocating for ourselves to be doing our own thing outside of what is relied upon on the grid. Now, this has a residential impact that's outside of the city's operating budget, and I agree with parts of that. But I do think that part of this is we are pushing that. Hey, we're not going to be able to hit our commitments. I forget what section it was. It says like, put your commitment goal in here. Oh, section 4A1 or AI says insert your local goals and analysis for recommended portfolio. Well, we're basically saying we can't hit these goals because of your changing of what your portfolio is going to be. And I don't think that's telling the right story.
What do you think that story what would you like that to say instead? Like I was
Well-
following you kind of towards the end. So yeah, just tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're going to be going to our politicians, right? Our city council, and we're going to be telling them we want you to sign on this bill because we can't hit. If I look at this right, and I read about this, we cannot hit our objectives because the Utilities Commission is allowing Duke to change their methodology, and that's not necessarily true. We know of how we could even hit our commitment without needing Duke because all we have to do is change what our energy usage is, how we procure our energy, whether we buy it through a green source advantage, et cetera, et cetera. Like there's things we can be doing to still hit our commitments, but we're not
Yeah.
doing that.
But it does mention, and just below that we would just need to purchase RECs or procure clean energy generation outside of Duke's. So I mean,
so
that's
section
the
B
answer.
says like this creates a significant challenge. It doesn't say it means that we can't meet those goals, but it does say that, this is going to make it significantly harder. The way I interpret it is the opportunity I see there is when David or Dave presents this to city council, they use this as an opportunity to highlight why we also need to be pursuing those energy efficiency targets, like actions ourselves, to show that, like, look at this letter that we're sending. And this is basically saying that right now we're highlighting that we're highly dependent on Duke's plan actions to meet our goals. And if you want to, if you as city council want to reduce our reliance on what Duke is doing, that highlights the need for us to take more of these recommendations, from the sustainability director, from our clean energy committee for energy efficiency stuff. The other thing I wanted to ask you is just, I don't know that I've ever come to a conclusion in my head with how like you and I are both in the energy efficiency industry, and like, so you don't have to sell me on the worth of it, but
Yep.
I don't know that I've come to conclusion in my head of how that helps us achieve our goal, because it's based on percentages and not quantities. So if our eGrid number is 40% clean and we reduce the amount of usage we're using, we're still only getting 40% clean. We're not just chopping off the 60% that's dirty. Now, obviously deploying renewables does increase our percentage, but that's not something that's nearly as cost effective or as practical as the energy efficiency side of it.
Yeah, I mean, we were adding some self generation to from our newer buildings.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I don't disagree with that, but I know, like, you and I have both been advocating for the energy efficiency piece of it. I just don't know do we have like a statement as far as how that gets us closer to the percentage mix that we want?
That the self-generating percentage is higher if you have more energy efficiency.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
That's
So
true.
if you
That's true.
if you're generating 2% now and you cut your whole energy spend or whole energy usage in half, then 2 becomes 4.
That's very true. That's
But
very
I
true.
still,
Maybe
you brought up
to-
can I talk
I'm
for a
sorry.
second?
Go ahead.
But you brought up a good point, because we're always talking about, like, what if we don't hit these goals? I mean, it's starting to become like a serious question as it gets to 2030, right? We're still close to 50% or whatever. I don't know if we're at 50% or like 49, but like, at what point do we start having like serious discussions about that? I know that's not about this plan, but I mean, if you have to procure something, you have to go through the whole process. How long does that take?
I'm not super worried about the 50% goal personally. I think we'll if we can continue to do energy efficiency, things that David and Dave are starting to get done. I think that will be really helpful. I think the GSA, I think we'll see some changes to GSA in the coming years that will probably help us get some additional self-generation or be able to procure some generation. So I think 50% is a little more achievable. I'm really worried about the 2050 net neutrality goal. That one's going to be really, really hard. If you told me, hey, you got to get to 90%, that would feel real good. Or even 80%, I'd feel real good. 100% is going to be really, really hard. But I think, Rich, you had asked a question, like, what would I want to do differently? Well, in this letter, I think I would consider arranging the numbers because I think section 4 that we just talked about is probably the most important section for our what we're trying to do. I think that's number one priority, especially when I mean, that's the whole goal of this organization is how do we get to 70% or 50% reduction by 2030. And some of these things, energy mix, as Jeff pointed out, some of these things aren't going to be dispatched until 2032, 2034. We're not going to see those. They're not going to make an impact on what we're doing today.
So,
I'm not saying it's not a problem. We should consider it. I'm just saying it's not the number one priority for us.
So I agree with you wholeheartedly there, PJ. What I'm not sure about for David's perspective is, I think if we as a committee were sending this letter, I'd absolutely agree. Like, you got to move number 4 to number 1.
Yeah.
But given that this is being put forth as a letter from the Sustainability Directors Network, I don't know that the rest of their priorities necessarily match with
Yeah,
ours.
well,
I
it's
don't know.
being put forth as a letter co-signed by local governments from across the state, so.
Yeah,
But
I like
they may
putting
agree.
4 first.
But we can absolutely make that recommendation to the Directors Network as you guys are workshopping it, that like we would consider moving number 4
I've got that noted.
farther up.
I think the other key thing, I mean, we're talking about, a lot of discussion here around our goals that we have for, our clean energy, for our municipal operations. But, I think what's going to ring really true for our city council is the affordability aspect. It's like here are steps that we can take to make, cost of living perhaps a little bit more affordable.
Well, that's the easy sell for the voters, right?
Can you clarify the cost of living or affordability, or is this? And I think I know where you're at. I just want to make sure for clarity, affordability for residents or affordability for the city, or both.
Or both. I mean,
Okay.
That's certainly something. I think it resonated particularly around housing affordability, and we need more housing for people in the area. But part of that housing affordability is the utility costs as well. So
the best thing we could do there is try to keep rates down.
keep rates down.
Anyway,
that's only going to help our rates that we pay as the city for all of our facilities as well. And we're already looking, trying to figure out, we know what Duke is proposing to the utility council for the next several years, but what's the utility council actually going to approve for rate increases?
I
want to point out section 1B, which says that local governments have a long history of collaborative engagement and partnership with Duke Energy, and wish to continue working with Duke to advance reliable, which I think is priority number 1, affordable, obviously number 2, and clean energy, which is number 3. And I just want to applaud, because I believe that those 3 pillars are in the right priority order, right? And so,
I agree.
Our city council, if they said, hey, rates are going to go up by 2%, okay, well, your reliability is going to go up by 3%. Like, is there, cost benefit analysis? We're in Hurricane Alley, right? And so, anything Duke can do to improve the reliability of our grid and not having power out for days upon days when we have.
Oh,
We lose them?
We lost PJ.
Okay. Well, PJ, let us know when you hop back on.
Sounded like he had.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. One thing.
I did like this letter a lot more than the last one. One of my hopes is that once they get all the comments from everyone, that it doesn't turn into the same document as last time, where it's just like everybody has an idea and then it gets thrown into the mix, and then you end up with some long document that you lose your train of thought when reading it.
So one thing I do want to highlight is I think PJ's comments and Sean's comments really highlight something that I've been kind of like working on and trying to plan for in the upcoming meeting, which is something that Jessica discussed in November. And Jessica brought up in December a road planning map with good, better, best options for city council. And I think this letter and the discussion we're having here really highlights the importance and the usefulness of that. To where we should have something that we can present to city council that says like, look, here's, based on this letter that you just saw, this is, these are the realities that you're facing. And here are some options and some roadmaps for you that provide you guidance on how aggressive you want to be and the progress that you can make based on that. So I do want to mention that like that's something I think that for our next meeting we should plan on doing, or I'd like for us to plan on doing, is workshopping those roadmaps so that we can actually provide some kind of concrete guidance to city council as they're navigating these kind of things that are only going to get, become more prevalent.
I mean, the flow of this document can almost be used as a template, right? I mean, it's nice that it just goes, in bold issue, few more details, and you should, or, the city of Wilmington should, or, so then you just like can read it real quick and know where you are and what has to happen.
For sure. Do we have more notes? Anyone have other comments or notes for David on this letter?
I was just going to comment, going back to section 2, and the question of the data centers coming. And they reference the other states, the other jurisdictions that are being a little bit more aggressive. Like I know Virginia created a whole new class of customer, a rate class for proposed data centers. And I think I'm glad that they go into this level of detail. I think that section D3 about open a proceeding to investigate co-located large scale, I think they're talking about data centers having their own like on-site power generation. Is that what that means?
Yeah, or other industries that
I mean,
really data.
I like that the document doesn't really talk about fairness. I think sticking with the concept of prudence, making sure we don't get stuck with these stranded assets that we have to pay for as customers. Obviously, that's the big political issue. I feel like they could even be more specific in sort of a large load customers have to kind of pay their own way. I don't see, you know what I mean? Like I would be comfortable with even more detail about.
And a key point there in Virginia in particular, they have that new thing that's actually provides, and they mention it here, is provides protection mechanism for the ratepayer. So
I'm a little like, I'm also conflicted on this. Like Jessica, I'm kind of with you 100%. Like as soon as I read this section, I was like, this is about data centers, which
Right.
If anyone who's talked to me in the last like 6 months knows that this is like my ultimate fear. For like, to me, this is the existential threat to us. But I'm a little hesitant to call them out in this document. Like I was sitting here reading this kind of thinking like, I like that they don't specifically like call out data centers and call out like a specific, because like, okay, so what happens in 3 months from now when the data center bubble bursts? And then all of a sudden, like that demand estimate crashes. And then they can start poking holes in this letter where they're like, oh, well, this doesn't matter anymore because there's no data centers coming, like X, Y, and Z. And you have politicians that may or may not be for or against. It's a divisive hot button issue, right? Like you say the word data center, the words data center, and people are all automatically at this point have some kind of feeling about it. So when you add that specificity to it, I think it may bring in some kind of like unnecessary biases when they keep it kind of generic like this, where it's like these large scale, heavy using customers should have their own, to Jessica's point, should have their own rate plan, have their own costs associated with it. I think that's kind of nice because it applies it blanketly to large scale problemsome.
I gotcha.
Customers. I don't know. Like I'm not, that's just how I was interpreting it. I don't know.
Does their modeling take into account data center boom? I saw the 2,000 megawatt figure.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it does because the 2 years ago, their projection was like 8 terawatt hours and the data center boom happened. And then this most recent carbon plan projects 80 terawatt hours. So I don't know that, I don't think that Duke has specifically stated that a significant portion of this projection is coming from data centers, but I think that it's pretty implied. And again, to PJ's point, we don't have their analysis of this projection, so we don't
Can't
see
tell,
it,
yeah.
see it directly.
Something else to consider associated with the data centers north of us. They're also very, in the PJM or very close to the PJM territory. So that's a capacity constrained area. All of the dynamics associated with that are completely different. And all of Duke's play around this may also be a little different based on the opportunity ahead, especially because they are right beside that area and what they can do associated with the challenges in the capacity constrained environment of PJM as well. So there's a lot of additional factors that may be influencing some of their longer term plans.
True.
Any other comments, questions, concerns, feedback for the SSDN?
I like your idea about including some type of table that shows the relative difference in cost between the different assets.
Mhm.
I think putting some type of measures into this thing might help illustrate some of the points better.
I think that's something I would share with the directors network is like, if we learned anything just in general from politics, but specifically from the document we provided last year, there's such a thing as too many words, and
Visuals.
and a picture will tell 1,000 words, so you can save a lot of text, and you can tell a much longer story with a few pictures added, graphs, charts, visuals added to it. And I think that there are I know I've seen examples over the last year and a half of some very telling ones as far as cost per fuel source, all the different stuff that we've talked about in here, emissions per source, X, Y, and Z. Again, I would prioritize not making this too into the weeds. So you don't want to add 30 figures for them to sort through, but 2 or 3 maybe would be, I think, impactful.
Got that noted.
I think there was one thing that popped up about, providing greater transparency is under 2D. Is there a specific thing that they want out of this? Like, is it just? I feel like, aren't they pretty transit? Do it seem like they don't provide the details? I don't know. It seems like they get a lot of questions about their forecasts. Do we really feel that they're not being transparent enough, or how to be more transparent? I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's been the case for the last few carbon plans that they feel that there could have been a lot more information sharing and transparency as to how they came up with some of their estimates. So, yeah.
Kind of to Phyllis's point, if they're building in this is an opportunity for us to sell energy to PJM, it's well, the ratepayer should know that.
Okay, yeah, I
And
just don't
to-
know. I assume they would let you know what, and I haven't read enough about it, but that they would tell you where their loads are coming from. But
And I don't
It's not so much where, it's all about, the modeling and
okay,
what they're using in those modeling cases to come up with the projected loads that they want more transparency around.
Remember, they're increasing their reserve margins too.
Yeah, Duke, North Carolina and South Carolina are gonna, coming together as well at some point, so.
I was reading there that's expected to be a big cost savings impact whenever the two Duke organizations merge, right?
We'll see.
We'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah,
There's not a,
we'll see.
there's not a great deal of trust between the public and the public entities
Yeah,
that
gotcha.
do energy.
You know, I know one thing that's sensitive around here, us being in Hurricane Alley is, you know, we recognize Duke as a partner in our community, you know, when lights go out, they're the ones with crews on the ground, you know, getting all of our electricity back on as soon as possible. So we certainly recognize them as a valuable partner. You know, we don't want to jeopardize that, but
Right.
you know, we also want to be responsible for our residents as well, and you know, staying aware of opportunities where we could perhaps push back a little bit and provide some input.
I think this is something I think this is too in the weeds for this, but I think something to keep in mind for when you discuss this with city council is that, and you know, maybe I'm stretching here because it's a personal gripe, but like I don't really even have such a problem, at least at the moment, with what the rates from Duke are. I don't think we're paying an unreasonable amount for our energy. What I do think is like unnecessarily unreasonable is that they're playing a shell game where they hide they hide half of our rates within this summary of riders and adjustments. And, you know, so they can say, well, we're only charging you 14 cents an hour. When you actually add in your summary of riders and all the different riders and adjustments, it comes out to more like 19 cents a kilowatt hour. And from a transparency community partner side of things, just tell us that you're charging us 19 cents a kilowatt hour is more in line, because and I think so. I would just be cognizant of that when you're speaking with city council, because it's very easy for the people at Duke to say, well, look, we have some of the lowest rates in the country, when in reality, it's because you're playing this kind of, you know, this rigmarole as far as classifications go.
Well, Rich, to your point, what used to be allowed in fuel riders is now in a fuel rider proceeding is different than just fuel.
Right.
It used to be just fuel, and now it's more than just fuel. And those proceedings typically are shorter than a general rate case.
So just something, I just think it's important for you to be prepared with that information if this is something that, you know, because I can 100% see Duke making that argument, and this is something that I feel is disingenuous of them in how they do this. So
It's interesting though that you have to try to balance the relationship with Duke and, you know, maintain a good working relationship with them. At the same time, you get a chance to maybe influence them a little bit. So it's quite a balance that you have to work out here.
It is a balance.
and me, I mean, you know, just personally for myself, I've not been unhappy with the service or like the work that Duke Energy provides us.
No, it's not.
You know, during Florence, I don't know what more they could have done. You know what I mean? Given the circumstances, and they stage people here, they have boots on the ground immediately. Like I appreciate the work that they do. Just think from a committee standpoint, like we have to be advocates we have to hold them accountable to the highest standard that is possible.
Exactly.
Because of how important just the role that they play in everyone's lives.
And they are a for-profit company.
Yeah.
So
Okay, if there's no other comments, then PJ, do you have something? I see.
No, I was just gonna say it's a regulated entity though. Same time.
yeah, that's true as well. Should gotta recognize that as well. I mean, yeah, I guess just next steps with this. I mentioned there's going to be a follow-up SSDN meeting where people will be providing comments such as these. The entire group to get worked in. I'll share, you know, drafts as they come available back to this group as well. But kind of, I guess, behind the scenes, I'll be, you know, kind of working it up city leadership change to see if there's going to be the appetite to sign on to the comment letter. Obviously would have to have a final draft of that at some point to be able to put in front of city leadership to get it to move up to city council. But I'll be trying to grease those wheels and make sure I'm answering any questions they may have as we are working through the process. So, I provided the timeline in the email I sent out last week with the agenda and in this document. So you can see they're, trying to get this done by March or so. So got a little bit of time, but things move slowly, and particularly if we need to get something on the council agenda, I need to make sure that all of those things are happening behind the scenes as well. So,
what does WRI stand for?
It's the World Resources Institute. So, yeah, they're just outside organization that helps with efforts like, they do this kind of thing, I think, across the country, utility rate discussions.
One other thing I didn't see at all is any commitment from Duke to pursue wind energy. It doesn't seem like they got much of an appetite for
There's
that.
somewhere that they've really kind of abandoned the previous goals that they had in the last carbon plan for either on or offshore wind.
So you haven't known me that long. My biggest initiative here is offshore wind. However, I didn't bring it up in this resource plan because I find it very hard to hold Duke to any kind of expectation with that when on the federal level they have halted all leases. They've put a whether temporary or not, there is a current stop on all work on offshore wind. So I find it unfair to expect Duke to have offshore wind or onshore wind in their planning when there's so much uncertainty at the federal level, and at the moment, there's so much there's just flat opposition to it at the federal level. I don't think that we can really advocate for them to push in the face of federal legislation. Or federal executive orders.
They could still look for onshore wind, but I think it's also a cost issue too. It's not competitive right now.
Well, and it's harder in North Carolina with the onshore. So,
if y'all have any additional comments or things that come to mind that you would like to share, just shoot an email or anything my way, and I'll be sure to mention it in the next group meeting we have about the letter. So perfect.
All right. In that case, let's move on to item number 3, updates for the EV transition study and the energy assessments at Skyline and Police HQ.
Yeah, we'll be pretty quick on these, just keeping y'all abreast of everything as they move along. We were able to get both of the energy assessments done for our 2 highest energy using facilities, being Skyline Center here, as well as police headquarters. Again, it was through again, this is one of Duke's programs that we are taking advantage of. Their no cost energy assessments through advancedenergy.org. So we were able to get both of those assessments done just a little bit before the holidays. Provided them some additional data following up from the on-site assessments, like 3 years worth of utility data for both of the facilities, and just kind of answering some odd and end questions that have followed up from the on-sites. They're hoping to get us a report, probably, February, maybe early March before we get a report. But both of those will be solid documents that we can, bring before city council. Obviously budgets, as you've heard many times before, are going to be tight, especially for this next year, but items that city council, this is another. Can y'all still hear me okay?
Oh, God.
I can hear you. I just see your photo.
Turn the video back on the left, bottom left.
Here we go.
It's now, but it's showing you, not the camera or whatever.
It's okay. Probably don't need to. I just lost the volume.
Here we go.
All right.
Yeah, we're hoping to get that report and any, they'll have some cost estimates worked into there as well. So again, we'll just keep y'all posted as that progresses along. Hopefully there's some easy ideas that we can implement right away. Obviously, there's probably going to be some capital cost items in there as well that we can use for future planning to drive down energy costs in those two facilities. But another step in our efforts as we harp on our baseline to drive down energy costs across the facility. In regard to the fleet EV transition study, we just had our January meeting last week. They've completed task number 1 and task number 2. They've given us a draft for task number 3, which is kind of the layout of city facilities across the city, where we plan to deploy electric vehicles. So we're just kind of finalizing how many vehicles we anticipate at each of those sites, exactly which departments are at those sites, and firming up addresses and all of that, which will lead into task 4, which is estimate of infrastructure that needs to be installed at each of those sites and costs around that. So
how many total tasks are there? Is it 4? Is it?
I think task 5 is the final report. So they're still looking at February, March kind of time frame for winding up the study.
Okay.
So that continues to progress along as well.
David, back on the study for the energy efficiency study, when do we expect to get the final information for them so that we can have some kind of debrief or some data set or recommendations on plans?
When do we expect a report from them?
Yes.
They were thinking sometime around February.
Okay. And are we going to have them present to us, give us the data ahead of time and have some kind of presentation on prioritization, best bang for your buck, et cetera?
Yeah. Why don't I look into that? I haven't asked for like a presentation specifically, but I can certainly ask them if it could be a great presentation to this group, I think. So let me look into that and get back to you. We do have for our next meeting.
Yes. So for the council's awareness, next month, Kara Spencer is going to be joining us from Legislative Affairs to discuss the 2026 legislative agenda. So bring your questions and comments ready for her.
If I can get a copy of that beforehand, even if it's a draft, I'll get it to the group.
Yeah. It sounds like, unfortunately, that the legislative agenda will already have been presented to city council and finalized before we meet with her. But we'll do what we can. And then I would also like to try and plan for next month to workshop our roadmaps for city council. So if you guys could give some thought to how you want that to look, or priorities that you feel the city council should address, and bring your pens and paper for that. We'd appreciate it, because I do, like, I see the value in that, and I think it is something that we really need to give to city council, because it's been multiple years now that at least one city council member has asked us, for lack of a better term, like more participation. And this is something that a deliverable that we can actually give them and say, like, you guys have been asking for guidance, here's your guidance. And something that we can reference going forward. So, yeah. Anything else that we?
That's our agenda for this month.
Okay.
I have
All right.
one topic. We had talked about before. We did it in early 25, I think, of trying to pick a date and time for this meeting that made sense for everybody, so we can try to get as much in-person participation. And I think we had a couple of heartaches on some different dates and times. Is that something we can revisit? As I've told y'all before, I have a conflicting meeting that backs up and is after this meeting, so my personal participation is hard. Did y'all lose me?
I can still hear you.
I heard you.
At least y'all heard me.
Yes.
I realized when David went like this and stopped.
Yeah.
Can't hear me anymore.
I can't see him right now. I just see you. I'm down with doing that again. It might be good with the 2 new members as well. I mean,
Yeah.
Check to see if there's a better time for the bigger group.
Yeah. I mean, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but I think it's worth us revisiting.
yeah.
Especially when the agenda comes out on Friday and then the meeting's on Monday. It's always like a scramble, I feel like, to review everything. So even if it's something a little later in the week, and then we can get a little bit more heads up on stuff too. Mondays are rough. I don't know.
I thought he had sent it out earlier this time.
Maybe
I had
he-
asked before.
Oh,
I had asked before.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I had asked before if he could send. Yeah, he sent it out Thursday in the afternoon, 2:30. But
Oh,
it's
true.
still like, we all have working jobs and we're trying to balance that
Yeah.
plus this.
Yeah. When we have the earlier meetings, I kind of know what's going to happen ahead of sending stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
But I would love to do one either late in the day or early in the morning, this meeting, because it's kind of a pain to get to for me.
Yeah,
Maybe.
it's not good either. Yeah, before I have to get to work or leave work early and go there and then go home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it definitely prohibits me getting there, like in person, having it this time, because it's like, what am I gonna spend? Hours getting there, and then sit there for an hour and a half, then have to go home, half hour.
Where are you based, Sean?
Well, I moved recently, so I'm now in Sunset Beach. So it takes me like an hour to get to Wilmington.
Oh, wow.
I
Yeah.
let David and all them know, because I was like, am I gonna still serve on the committee? They were like, yeah. But I still have a condo there, so if anybody wants to buy one.
Still on this. That's funny.
But-
Well, I got kicked off earlier, so maybe they did too.
I think it's fine. If you want to add, if you want to send an email or something, I'm sure he's willing to do it.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Y'all want to call it?
I'm gonna call it.
Did anybody notice that Val Jean looks like she's on the meeting as well? I wasn't sure if she got recorded into.
All
She's
right.
here.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just,
We'll make sure. We probably should let David know. Valjean, just maybe send him an email.
Okay.
All All right, guys. Well, have a good day.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
y'all.
All right.
Good to see everybody.
right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care.